The heart monitor flatlined, and the last thing I heard was the automated text alert on my husband's phone, billing my credit card for a luxury suite across town. Then I opened my eyes. I was back in my kitchen 3 years earlier. The smell of burnt toast and cheap coffee, heavy in the air. My husband's hand was extended across the table, waiting for my salary card. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just smiled, wrapped my fingers tightly around the plastic, and prepared to watch him starve. The transition wasn't a spiritual awakening bathed in white light. It was violent. 1 second, I was suffocating in a sterile hospital bed, my lungs filling with fluid from the stress-induced coronary that finally gave out on me. The next, I was choking on a mouthful of scalding black coffee. I coughed a harsh, wet sound that scraped my throat. Drops of brown liquid splattered across the faux marble kitchen table. "Jesus, Nora, careful." The voice was annoyed, smooth, slightly nasal, laced with that perpetual undercurrent of boredom. I blinked through watering eyes. David was sitting across from me. He wasn't wearing the tailored Italian suit I had bought him for his promotion, the promotion he never actually got. He was wearing his faded gray college t-shirt. His jaw was lined with morning stubble. He looked young. He looked healthy. He looked exactly like the man who had let me work myself to death while he played house with a 22-year-old barista on my dime. My chest heaved. I pressed a hand flat against my sternum. No wires, no electrodes pulling at my skin, just the soft cotton of my own bathrobe. "You okay?" he asked, not looking up from his phone. His thumb swiped rhythmically across the screen. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I am a ghost, I thought. The words stuck in my throat, blocked by a sudden, intense nausea. The kitchen smelled intensely of burnt rye bread and the acidic tang of cheap coffee grounds. The refrigerator hummed a persistent rattling vibration that I could feel in the soles of my bare feet. It was Tuesday, the Tuesday after my promotion to regional director. "I'm fine," I rasped. My voice sounded thin, reedy. I cleared my throat. Swallowed wrong. Right. Anyway. David set his phone face down on the table. A deliberate movement. He leaned forward, interlacing his fingers. He gave me that smile, the boyish, lopsided grin that had charmed me into paying his student loans 6 years ago. "Like we talked about last night. With your new salary bump, it makes sense to consolidate. The joint investment account is ready to go. If you just give me the new payroll card, I can route the direct deposits today. We'll finally get ahead of the market, babe." He extended his hand, palm up, waiting. I stared at his hand. I noticed the impeccably clean fingernails, the faint scar on his knuckle from a drunk biking accident in his 20s. I remembered with agonizing clarity staring at this exact hand 3 years from now, hoping it would hold mine as the ECG monitor shrieked its final warning. It hadn't. He had been too busy texting Chloe to ask if she liked the thread count of the sheets at the plaza. My stomach churned, a cold knot tightening beneath my ribs. Anger didn't come. Not yet. Just a profound, paralyzing disgust, like stepping barefoot on a slug in the dark. I looked down at the blue plastic card resting near my coffee mug. It represented 70 hours a week. It represented missed bedtimes with my daughter. It represented the stress that would eventually harden my arteries and stop my heart at 34. I reached out. My fingers brushed the plastic. David's smile widened just a fraction. He was already spending it in his head. The down payment on the Audi. The business dinners downtown. I slid the card off the table and slipped it into the pocket of my bathrobe. David's hand remained suspended in the air for a full 3 seconds before he lowered it. The boyish grin slipped, replaced by a tight, thin line. "What are you doing?" he asked. The boredom was gone from his voice, replaced by a sharp edge. "I changed my mind," I said. I picked up my coffee. It was lukewarm, now bitter and acidic. I swallowed it anyway. I needed the grounding sensation of it hitting my empty stomach. "I'm going to manage my own salary." David let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Nora, we talked about this. We agreed. I have the portfolio set up. You don't have time to track mutual funds and index yields. You're going to be exhausted with the new role. I'll manage. Why are you being difficult?" He leaned back, crossing his arms, the classic defensive posture. "Is this a control thing? Because you make a little more money, now you suddenly don't trust me. I make all the money I thought. You haven't closed a client in 14 months. It's not a control thing, David. It's just a bank account." I kept my voice flat, monotone. If I let any emotion in, if I let the raging inferno of betrayal leak out, I would grab the steak knife from the drying rack and plunge it into his neck. And I couldn't go to prison. I had a daughter. Speaking of my daughter, a soft padding sound came from the hallway. A small, messy head of brown hair peeked around the doorframe. Lily. She was 3. In the timeline I had just escaped, she was 6, standing crying, in a hospital waiting room with a social worker, because her father couldn't be bothered to answer his phone. "Mama," she mumbled, rubbing a sleepy eye with a fist. She wore an oversized pink pajama shirt that smelled faintly of lavender detergent and dried sweat. My breath caught. The cold knot in my stomach shattered, flooding my chest with a warmth so violent it physically hurt. I dropped the coffee mug. It clattered against the table, spilling the dregs. But I didn't care. I shoved my chair back the wood, scraping harshly against the linoleum, and crossed the kitchen in 2 strides. I dropped to my knees and pulled her into my arms. She felt so incredibly small, so fragile, her little bones pressed against my collarbone. I buried my face in her messy hair and inhaled. She smelled real. She was real. "Hey, baby," I whispered, my voice finally cracking. Tears hot and fast spilled over my eyelashes and soaked into her pajama collar. "Mama's got you. I'm right here. You're squishing me," Lily complained softly, but she wrapped her little arms around my neck anyway. I looked up over her shoulder. David was standing now, wiping the spilled coffee off the table with a paper towel. He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and disgust. "Are you having a breakdown or something?" he asked. "You're acting insane this morning." I stood up, lifting Lily onto my hip. Her weight was an anchor, keeping me tethered to the floor, stopping me from floating away into the absolute absurdity of the situation. I looked at David. I saw the weak chin, the calculating eyes, the hollow shell of a man I had somehow mistaken for a partner. "No, David," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I think I'm finally waking up. The hardest part wasn't the logistics, it was the performance. For the next 4 days, I had to live in a house with a ghost, a parasitic ghost that I was actively exorcising. I had to sleep in the same bed, feeling the dip of the mattress, when he climbed in, smelling the cloying, synthetic sandalwood of his body wash. I had to listen to him breathe. Every time his chest rose and fell, I remembered the agonizing stillness of my own lungs in that hospital room. I didn't argue with him. When he brought up the salary card again, acting deeply wounded and playing the victim of a financially abusive spouse, I just gave him a tired smile and blamed HR. "There's a glitch with the new payroll system." I lied, buttering Lily's toast. The scrape of the knife against the bread sounded deafening in the quiet kitchen. "They said it might take a billing cycle to sort out the direct deposits," he sighed loudly. rubbing his temples as if I were putting an immense strain on his life. Fine, but I need $2,000 transferred to the joint, checking by Friday. The car insurance is due, and I have that networking seminar downtown. The networking seminar. I almost laughed. The seminar was a weekend trip to a boutique hotel in the next state. Chloe lived in the next state. "I'll write you a check," I said, smoothly. I wrote him the check. It was the last penny of mine he would ever see. While David went to his home office to play video games and pretend to answer emails, I took sick leave. I didn't sit on the couch. I went to work. The bank was freezing. The air conditioning was cranked too high, making the stale air smell like ozone and carpet cleaner. I sat across from a loan officer named Arthur, a heavy-set man with a comb-over and sympathetic eyes. "I need to open a new checking and savings account," I told him, keeping my hands folded tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. "Sole ownership, no joint access, and I need to move all the funds from my personal savings into it." "Of course, Mrs. Vance. It's Nora. Just Nora." "Right. Nora." Arthur clicked his mouse a few times. The mechanical clack-clack was rhythmic, soothing. "I see here you are the primary on the joint checking account as well. Do you want to transfer those funds?" I hesitated. The joint account had about $12,000 in it. My bonuses from the last 2 years. If I drained it, David would get an alert on his phone immediately. The performance would be over before I was ready for the curtain call. "No," I said, the word tasting like ash. "Leave the joint account open, but remove the overdraft protection linked to my personal credit line. Let him drain it." $12,000 was a cheap price to pay for a clean getaway. It was severance pay for the parasite. Over the next 2 days, I became a phantom in my own life. I moved with agonizing precision. I didn't pack a massive suitcase. That would raise questions. Instead, I smuggled things out in my work tote, bit by bit. Lily's favorite books, her birth certificate, my passport, the small jewelry box containing my grandmother's ring. I rented a small, climate-controlled storage unit 3 towns over and started depositing the pieces of my actual life into the aluminum-sided locker. The most sickening part was gathering the evidence. I didn't need it for a divorce. My state was no fault, but I needed it for myself. I needed the concrete proof to look at whenever the insidious, socially conditioned guilt tried to creep in. Whenever the voice in my head whispered, "But he's Lily's father." "But you made a vow." On Thursday night, while David was in the shower, I took his iPad. He never changed his passcode. It was his own birthday. Typical. My fingers were ice cold as I tapped the numbers. The screen unlocked, illuminating my face in the dim bedroom. I didn't go to his texts. I went to his hidden photo album. There it was, the timeline of my murder. Photos of Chloe, young blonde smiling in the front seat of the Audi I paid the lease on. Receipts for jewelry I never received. Emails to a realtor about a cozy starter home just outside the city limits. The worst part wasn't the sexual betrayal. It was the absolute casual entitlement of it all. He wasn't just having an affair. He was slowly, methodically, carving out my flesh to feed someone else. He was building a new life on the foundation of my exhaustion. I took photos of the screen with my own phone. My hands didn't shake. The hot, blinding rage I had expected still hadn't arrived. Instead, a profound, chilling clarity settled over me. It felt like standing in a walk-in freezer. All the messy, complicated emotions of love and betrayal froze solid, turning into sharp, useful weapons. I heard the water shut off in the master bathroom, the squeak of the glass shower door opening. I put the iPad exactly where I found it, down to the millimeter. I slipped back under the covers and turned off my bedside lamp. When David walked into the bedroom, a towel wrapped around his waist, damp hair curling over his forehead, he looked at my still form. "You awake?" he whispered. I kept my breathing slow, rhythmic. Deep inhales, slow exhales. The heavy dead air of the silent house pressed against my eardrums. He didn't check on me. He didn't come closer. He just picked up his phone, walked out to the living room, and shut the door. I opened my eyes in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan blades. One more day, I promised myself. Just one more day. Friday morning felt different. The air in the house was dense, charged with a strange, static electricity that only I could feel. It was moving day. David was in a surprisingly good mood. He was whistling as he made his protein. Shake the blender, grinding loudly, drowning out the morning news on the television. He was leaving for his networking seminar at noon. "You're dropping Lily at daycare, right?" he asked, wiping a smudge of protein powder off the counter. He was wearing an ironed button-down shirt and his favorite cologne. The smell of it, heavy musk and synthetic citrus, made my throat tighten. "Yes," I said. I was dressed in a simple pair of jeans and a black sweater. No makeup. My hair pulled back in a tight clip. Utilitarian. "I'm taking the day off. Have some errands to run." "Good." He took a long drink from his shaker bottle. "You need the rest. You've been acting stiff all week. Relax a little, Nora. The money will sort itself out." He came over and kissed the top of my head. His lips felt cold against my scalp. A Judas kiss. "Drive safe," I told him. It wasn't a wish of goodwill. It was an instruction. I didn't want him dying in a car crash. Death was too easy. Death was an escape. I wanted him to live a long, miserable life entirely on his own merits. At 11:30 a.m., David loaded his leather duffel bag into the Audi. He waved to me from the driveway, flashed that lopsided grin, and backed out. I stood by the front window, watching the silver car disappear around the corner. I didn't move for 5 full minutes. I just listened to the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock in the hallway. It sounded like a bomb counting down. Then I went to work. I didn't hire movers. I didn't rent a massive truck. I had my SUV, and I only wanted the essentials. I packed my clothes in heavy-duty garbage bags. It was faster, and they fit easily into the trunk. I stripped Lily's room of her favorite toys, her blanket, her clothes. I left the heavy oak crib. I left the changing table. I left the expensive rocking chair David's mother had bought us. I went through the kitchen like a locust. I didn't touch the dishes or the appliances, but I opened the safe hidden behind the pantry shelves. I took my grandmother's silver, the emergency cash stash of $3,000, and the spare keys to the house. By 2 p.m., the SUV was packed tight. I walked through the house one last time. It looked strange. It didn't look ransacked. It just looked hollowed out, like a piece of fruit that had a core carefully extracted without breaking the skin. His clothes were still perfectly hung in the closet. His gaming console was still hooked up to the TV. His life was entirely intact. Mine was just gone. I left 3 things on the kitchen island. First, a printed screenshot of the email he sent to the realtor regarding the starter home for him and Chloe. Second, the check for $2,000 he had asked for. I had voided it with a thick black Sharpie, writing a single word across the payee line, starve. Third, my wedding ring. I didn't dramatically throw it. I just placed it gently in the center of the voided check. It looked small and cheap sitting there, a piece of meaningless metal. I picked up Lily from daycare at 3 p.m. When she saw me, her face lit up a brilliant, gap-toothed smile that shattered the lingering coldness in my chest. She ran on stubby legs, throwing herself at my knees. "Mama early." "Yeah, baby bug," I said, lifting her high into the air, inhaling the smell of Play-Doh and graham crackers on her skin. "We're going on an adventure." "Where?" she asked, her big brown eyes wide with curiosity. "Away," I promised her. I strapped her into her car seat, double-checking the buckles, making sure she was secure. Safe. I climbed into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The heavy thunk of the locks engaging was the best sound I had heard in 2 lifetimes. I pulled out my phone. I blocked David's number. I blocked his email. I blocked his mother, his sister, and his best friend. I logged into my cell provider's app and suspended his line. The phone was on my family plan, after all. He was probably halfway to the hotel by now. I imagined him trying to use the GPS or text Chloe that he was arriving, only to find a no-service notification. A small, genuine smile touched my lips. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the daycare. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't care what was behind me. For the first time in years, my chest didn't hurt. My heart beat with a steady, rhythmic thrum. It was a strong heart, a survivor's heart. The parasite was severed. Now it was just a matter of waiting for the decay to set in. The extended stay motel on Interstate 89 smelled like industrial bleach, stale cigarette smoke, and a desperate attempt at pine-scented air freshener. It was a symphony of cheapness. The carpet was a wiry brown and orange geometric pattern designed to hide stains, rough enough to scrape the skin off your knees. The mini fridge in the corner hummed with a violent rattling vibration that cut through the silence of the room. To me, it was the Ritz. It was Friday night. Lily was asleep on the sagging double bed, her small chest rising and falling beneath a scratchy polyester duvet. She had eaten microwave macaroni and cheese from a plastic cup for dinner, completely thrilled by the novelty of eating in bed, while watching cartoons on a muted, boxy television. I sat at the particle board desk by the window, the glow of my laptop screen casting a blue, sickly light across my face. Outside, the rhythmic whoosh of semi-trucks tearing down the highway sounded like an ocean trapped in a wind tunnel. I had a lukewarm cup of tap water by my elbow. I wasn't drinking coffee. My heart was already beating a fast, hollow tattoo against my ribs, an anxious rhythm left over from the timeline where stress had killed me. I kept pressing 2 fingers to my carotid artery, checking the pace, grounding myself in the physical reality of my own living pulse. On the screen was the ledger for our joint checking account. I hit refresh, pending. Transaction, L'Auberge Dining Room, $485.20. I let out a slow breath. He was at the boutique hotel, the networking seminar, with Chloe. He had arrived around 4 o'clock. I knew because that's when the $1,200 hold for the luxury suite had appeared. Now they were eating sea bass and drinking overpriced Chardonnay on the $12,000 I had left behind as severance. It felt surreal. I watched the numbers tick down, as if it were a video game. I didn't feel the sting of betrayal I would have felt in my first life. I just felt a cold, clinical fascination. I was watching a leech gorge itself, completely unaware that it had been severed from the main artery. I hit refresh again an hour later. Pending transaction. The Velvet Lounge, $210. Drinks. They were having cocktails. I pictured him leaning across a dimly lit table, using that lopsided smile, telling Chloe how his wife just didn't understand his ambitions, how he was on the verge of a massive breakthrough with his startup. Lies wrapped in expensive liquor. Saturday was a bloodbath. I sat at the sticky desk, feeding Lily grapes and stale crackers, watching the digital slaughter of my hard-earned bonuses. La Mer Spa and Wellness, $650. Saks Fifth Avenue, $940. L'Auberge Room Service, $115. He was buying her clothes, massages. He thought he had the new salary card. He thought, come Monday, another $8,000 would miraculously drop into this account to cover the carnage. He was spending with the reckless manic energy of a man who believed the well was bottomless. By Sunday morning, the account balance was hovering just under $4,000. He had burned through $8,000 in less than 48 hours. Sunday afternoon, the transactions abruptly stopped. I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. The skin felt paper-thin and gritty. He was driving home, the 2-hour commute back to reality. I visualized the sequence of events. He would pull the Audi into the driveway. He would notice my SUV was gone, but he wouldn't think much of it. Grocery run, maybe. He would walk through the front door, drop his leather duffel bag on the floor, and call out my name. The silence of the house would greet him, the hollow, dead air echo of an empty space. He would walk into the kitchen. He would see the island, the voided check, the ring, the screenshot of his email to the realtor. My phone was off, buried at the bottom of my tote bag, permanently disconnected from his world. But I knew he would try to reach me. He would grab his phone, dial my number, and get the automated voice telling him the line was suspended. The panic wouldn't set in immediately. First, it would be anger, indignation. How dare I cut off his phone? How dare I throw a tantrum? I opened my work laptop. I had set up a private filtered folder in my corporate email, catching anything forwarded from his address. At 4:15 p.m., the first email dropped into the folder. Subject, "What the hell is this, Nora?" Very funny. Turn my phone back on. Where are you and Lily? I'm exhausted from the conference, and I don't have time for these games. Call me. I didn't reply. I just stared at the bold, black text. Games. He still thought he was the one holding the controller. An hour passed. The sun began to set, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the motel parking lot. Subject, Nora. Half your closet is gone. Did you take Lily to your mother's? You're acting completely unhinged. We need to talk about this like adults. You're overreacting to an email that was taken completely out of context. Come home. Out of context. I almost laughed. A dry scraping sound in the quiet room. By 8 p.m., the tone shifted. He had tried to log into our shared phone plan. He had tried to check the credit cards, the ones I had reported lost and replaced with new numbers. He was hitting the firewalls I had spent 3 days building. Subject, urgent. Nora. My cards are declining. I tried to order dinner and the visa bounced. Did you freeze the accounts? This is financial abuse. You can't just take my daughter and lock me out of our money. Call me right now, or I am calling the police. I leaned back in the plastic chair. It groaned under my weight. Call the police, I thought. Tell them your wife took her own money and her own child and left the state you live in. See how fast they laugh you off the line. I shut the laptop. The blue light vanished, plunging the room into the dim yellow glow of the bedside lamp. I walked over to the bed and curled my body around Lily's warm, sleeping form. I buried my nose in her hair. She smelled like cheap motel soap and childhood. Tomorrow was Monday. The real world was waiting. And David was about to find out exactly how much he cost. I didn't sleep. I just existed in a state of hyper-vigilant suspension, listening to the trucks on the highway and the erratic rattling of the mini-fridge. By 6 a.m., I was up. I dressed in a charcoal gray pantsuit that fit me like armor. I pulled my hair back into a severe, sleek knot. I applied matte red lipstick, a color I never wore. a color David hated because he said it made me look intimidating. That was the point. I dropped Lily off at a new temporary daycare near my office. The guilt of uprooting her gnawed at the edges of my resolve, a sharp little ache behind my ribs. But I shoved it down. Temporary discomfort for permanent safety. I arrived at my corporate building at 7:30 a.m. The lobby smelled of expensive coffee, rain-dampened wool coats, and floor wax. I swiped my badge, the electronic beep loud in the cavernous marble-tiled space. I walked straight to the security desk. Stan, a retired cop with a thick gray mustache and a gut that pushed against his utility belt, looked up from his newspaper. "Morning, Miss Nora. Early start for the new director." "Morning, Stan," I said. My voice was level, but my palms were sweating inside my coat pockets. "I need to revoke building access for my husband, David. Effective immediately." Stan paused, his eyes flicking up to my face, reading the tension in my jaw. He didn't ask questions. He just turned to his monitor and started typing. "Done. Card is deactivated. Do you want him flagged?" "Yes," I said. "If he shows up, he is not permitted past the lobby. And please, call me immediately." "You got it." I rode the elevator up to the 14th floor. The air pressure changed, popping my ears. I walked into my new corner office. The view of the city skyline was obscured by a thick gray drizzle. The glass felt cold against my forehead when I pressed against it. I waited. At 10:14 a.m., my desk phone chimed. "Ms. Nora." Stan's voice was low professional. "He's here. Front desk. He's a little agitated." "I'm coming down," I said. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs, letting the physical exertion burn off the adrenaline that was suddenly flooding my system. My heart was pounding, that terrifying, erratic thumping that made me acutely aware of my own mortality. I hated that my body still reacted to him. I hated that the trauma of the previous timeline was etched into my nervous system. I forced myself to breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. I pushed open the heavy fire door to the lobby. David was standing near the security turnstiles. He looked awful. The boyish charm was gone, replaced by a frantic, hollow-eyed desperation. He was wearing the same button-down shirt he had worn on Sunday. It was wrinkled, untucked on one side. He hadn't shaved. When he saw me, he lunged forward, but Stan stepped into his path, placing a heavy, authoritative hand on his chest. "Sir, stay behind the line." David swatted at Stan's hand, his face twisting into an ugly sneer. "Get off me, rent-a-cop. That's my wife." "David," I said. My voice echoed in the marble lobby. Several people holding coffees turned to look. He froze his eyes, locking onto mine. He looked at the gray suit, the red lipstick, the absolute absence of warmth in my posture. "Nora, what the hell are you doing?" His voice was a harsh hiss. He stepped as close to the turnstile as Stan would allow. "My keycard is dead. My phone is dead. I went to the bank this morning. The teller told me the joint account is overdrawn." "Overdrawn, Nora? There was 12 grand in there on Friday." "You spent it," I said flatly. "I bought a few things for the seminar." He snapped his voice, rising, bouncing off the high ceilings. "You took your direct deposit out. You illegally drained our funds." I took my own salary. I corrected him, keeping my volume low, forcing him to strain to hear me. "The joint account was yours to manage. Remember, you told me you had it under control. If you spent $12,000 on room service in spa treatments for your 22-year-old barista, that sounds like a portfolio management issue." The color drained from his face. A sickly gray pallor swept over his cheeks. His mouth closed, and opened again. The realization hit him like a physical blow. I knew about Chloe. I knew everything. He swallowed hard. You're crazy. You're violating my rights. You kidnapped Lily. Lily is safe, I said. The mention of my daughter triggered a primal violent surge in my blood, but I kept my face utterly blank. And you have no rights to my income. You never did. You were a dependent, and now you are cut off. I'll sue you. He spat spittle flying from his lips. He was unraveling the slick, confident facade, shattering into pathetic shards, right in front of the morning commuters. I'll take half of everything. I'll take the house. I'll take full custody. I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer and pulled out a thick, white envelope. I handed it across the turnstile. He took it automatically, his fingers trembling. Those are the divorce papers, I said. Filed this morning. Fault-based citing adultery and financial dissipation. My lawyer has requested a forensic audit of all joint accounts and credit lines for the last 5 years. Every penny you siphon to Chloe will be deducted from your microscopic share of the non-existent marital assets. He stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. I don't have money for a lawyer, he whispered, the anger suddenly collapsing into a raw, pathetic panic. Better start applying for jobs, I said. I turned my back on him and started walking toward the elevator banks. Nora, he yelled. The sound was ragged, tearing at his throat. Nora, you can't just leave me with nothing. The Audi lease is due on Wednesday. Nora, I didn't turn around. I stepped into the empty elevator, pressed the button for the 14th floor, and watched the polished steel doors slide shut, cutting off the sound of his begging. The silence inside the cabin was absolute. I leaned against the back wall, closed my eyes, and let out a long, shaky breath. My hands were trembling violently now. My knees felt like water. I wasn't a superhero. I was terrified, exhausted, and running on fumes. But I was alive. And for the first time in 6 years, I was free. The adrenaline wore off 3 days later, leaving behind a grueling, leaden exhaustion. Surviving didn't mean life magically became easy. It just meant I traded the suffocating weight of betrayal for the sharp, exhausting edges of single parenthood. We moved out of the motel on a rainy Thursday and into a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that bordered the industrial district. It wasn't the sprawling suburban house we had left. It smelled of fresh, cheap latex paint and old wood floorboards that creaked under every step. The heating pipes banged like a drummer in the basement. But it was ours. I bought a used mattress off the internet and slept on the floor in my bedroom. I bought Lily a cheap twin bed with a bright yellow comforter. Our dining table was a foldable card table I found at a thrift store. Eating takeout Chinese food off paper plates, sitting on mismatched folding chairs, I felt a strange, profound peace. There was no ghost in the house, no synthetic sandalwood cologne lingering in the bathroom, no tension humming in the air, waiting to snap. While I rebuilt our lives from the studs up, David's life was undergoing a rapid, spectacular demolition. I didn't have to seek out the information. The fallout was too massive to contain bleeding through the legal channels and mutual acquaintances. My lawyer, Rachel, was a shark in a tailored Chanel suit. Her office smelled of expensive leather and stale lemon polish. She took my case on a Friday, looked at the iPad photos of David's affair and the bank statements of his wild spending spree with Chloe, and smiled a slow, terrifying smile. He's bleeding out, Rachel told me, over a crackling phone line a week later, the sound of her typing aggressively in the background. His credit cards are all maxed. The joint account auto-closed due to insufficient funds and negative balances. I just got off the phone with his legal counsel, some cheap public defender type he managed to scrounge up. They're asking for temporary spousal support. I gripped my coffee mug. The cheap ceramic was hot against my palm. No. Oh, don't worry. I laughed him off the call. Given the documented dissipation of assets on an extramarital affair, no judge in this county is going to grant him an emergency stipend. He burned his own bridge. The dominoes fell with sickening speed. The first to go was the Audi. I had removed my name as a guarantor a month prior in anticipation of this. When the lease payment bounced on Wednesday and the subsequent late fees piled up, the dealership didn't waste time. According to a hysterical, drunken voicemail David left on my corporate office phone, a voicemail I promptly forwarded to Rachel. They towed the car right out of the driveway while he was inside playing video games. Without a car, he couldn't get to the suburban house easily. He was trapped in the sprawling 4-bedroom tomb we used to share miles away from public transit with a mortgage payment he couldn't even conceptualize paying. Then came the emails. They bypassed my blocked lists by coming from newly created frantic Gmail addresses. The tone wildly oscillated, a testament to a mind fracturing under the weight of sudden poverty. Monday 2 a.m. Subject: You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy, you vindictive bitch. I have no power. The electric company shut it off today because the auto pay was linked to your dead card. I am sitting in the dark. You are a monster. Lily is going to hate you when she finds out what you did to her father. Wednesday, 4:15 p.m. Subject: Please, Nora. Nora, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm so sorry. I messed up. Chloe was a mistake. She left yesterday, packed her bags, and took an Uber when she realized I couldn't take her out to dinner anymore. She called me a loser. I have $20 to my name. I'm eating dry cereal. Please, just send me $200 for groceries. I'm begging you, for the sake of the vows we took. I read that second email while sitting at the card table, watching Lily color a picture with a broken red crayon. The late afternoon sun filtered through the cheap vinyl blinds, casting stripes of dusty light across the scarred wood floor. I looked at the words on the screen. I'm eating dry cereal. In my first life, those words would have broken me. The deeply ingrained, socially conditioned reflex to fix, to mother, to heal would have overridden my own self-preservation. I would have transferred the money. I would have driven over with groceries. I would have believed the apology convinced myself that this was the rock bottom that would finally make him change. And then a year later, my heart would have exploded in my chest while he was out buying another woman a necklace with my money. I touched my sternum. The steady, strong beat of my heart was my anchor. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel triumph either. I just felt a profound, heavy emptiness. It was the weight of ashes, the realization that the man I had loved had never existed. He was just a mold, taking the shape of whatever container provided the most comfort. I highlighted the email, clicked print, and added it to the thick manila folder labeled legal. I closed the laptop and walked over to Lily. I crouched down, resting my chin on the edge of the card table. What are you drawing, Bug? I asked softly. She looked up, a smudge of red wax on her cheek. A house, for us, and a big dog. I like it. I smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached my eyes. Maybe we'll get a dog someday. A big one, she insisted, turning back to her paper. I stood up, walking into the tiny kitchen to start boiling water for pasta. Outside, the rain started again, a soft, rhythmic drumming against the window pane. I was 31 years old. I had a folding table, an air mattress, and a daughter who loved me. I had a second chance. And somewhere, across town, sitting in a dark, cold house, my husband was finally learning how to starve. It took exactly 3 weeks for the cavalry to arrive. I was sitting on my secondhand thrift store couch, sorting through a pile of Lily's outgrown clothes. The fabric smelled faintly of the cheap laundry powder I had switched to a sharp, artificial mountain breeze, scent that lacked the soft, expensive lavender notes of my past life. I didn't mind. It smelled like solvency. My burner phone buzzed against the glass top of the coffee table. The screen illuminated, displaying an unknown number from David's area code. I let it ring 4 times. I knew exactly who it was. The timeline of his desperation was predictable. He had exhausted his own tearful emails. He had realized my lawyer was an impenetrable wall of ice, and his own credit was a smoking crater. It was time to call in his mother. I swiped the green icon and put the phone to my ear. I didn't say hello. Nora. The voice was tight, thin, and vibrating, with an indignation that tried to masquerade as maternal concern. Barbara. She always smelled of peppermint hard candies and judgmental hairspray. Hello, Barbara. Nora. Thank God. Why is your old phone disconnected? Do you have any idea the panic you've caused? David has been beside himself. He said you just packed up and disappeared with Lily. I picked up a tiny denim jacket and folded the sleeves inward. I didn't disappear, Barbara. I moved out. David knows exactly where the divorce papers were filed, and his lawyer has my lawyer's contact information. That's not a disappearance. That's an exit. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Divorce. Over a stupid, harmless argument. Nora, listen to me. Marriage is hard. It takes work. You don't just throw away a family because things get tough or because a man makes a little mistake. A little mistake. That's what they called 14 months of systematic financial and emotional bleeding. A little mistake. Did he tell you about the mistake, Barbara? I asked, keeping my voice incredibly soft. I didn't want to wake Lily, who was napping in the next room, but I also wanted Barbara to lean in, to really hear the coldness in my throat. He said he was feeling neglected. Barbara's defensive tone spiked. He said, you were always working. You made him feel small, Nora. A man needs to feel respected in his own home. He had a brief indiscretion. He regrets it deeply. You're punishing him too harshly. A bitter, rusted laugh scraped the back of my throat. I looked at the bare walls of my apartment, the peeling paint in the corner. He spent $12,000 of my money on his indiscretion in a single weekend. I said, reciting the facts with the clinical detachment of a coroner reading an autopsy report. He was planning to buy a house with her using my credit score. He hasn't contributed a single dollar to his own household in nearly 2 years. I wasn't his wife, Barbara. I was his host organism. And I decided to stop letting him feed. How dare you speak about my son that way? The mask slipped. The mother bear was out claws bared, defending the cub she had coddled into uselessness. You are a cold, vindictive woman. He has nothing. The bank is starting the foreclosure process. The power is off. He's sleeping in his winter coat. Nora, is that what you want? To see the father of your child freeze in the dark? The image flashed in my mind. David huddled under the expensive duvet we had picked out together, shivering in a dark, empty house, the silence ringing in his ears. The same silence I had felt in the hospital room when my heart monitor flatlined. Yes, I said. It was the truest word I had spoken in 6 years. Barbara gasped. You're a monster. No, I'm just a mirror. I squeezed the denim jacket in my lap, feeling the stiff seams bite into my palms. I am showing him exactly what his life looks like when I'm not paying for it. Do not call this number again, Barbara. If David needs a warm place to sleep, he can move back into your basement. I ended the call and blocked the number. My hands were shaking. A fine, violent tremor that started in my fingertips and worked its way up my forearms. The social conditioning was a heavy, suffocating blanket, whispering that I was cruel. He's shivering. He's hungry. He's the father of your child. I stood up, dropping the clothes, and walked into the bathroom. I turned on the tap and splashed freezing water onto my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The bags under my eyes were dark purple smudges against my pale skin. But my eyes were clear. In my first life, I had paid the mortgage, paid for the affair, paid for the stress with my own failing arteries. I had died so he could live comfortably with a 22-year-old. Let him freeze. 2 weeks later, the bank officially foreclosed on the suburban house. Rachel, my lawyer, sent me the notice. David hadn't fought it. He couldn't. He didn't have the funds to hire a lawyer to contest the eviction, let alone pay the mounting arrears. He had packed whatever he could fit into garbage bags and called a friend to pick him up. He was 32 years old, and he was sleeping on a futon in a bachelor pad, smelling of stale beer and unwashed socks. The perfect life he had built on my back had completely collapsed into a pile of worthless rubble, and I hadn't even had to push it. I just stopped holding up the walls. The courthouse smelled of floor wax, nervous sweat, and old paper. The wooden benches outside the mediation room were hard, the varnish worn away by decades of people waiting to dismantle their lives. It was mid-November, 6 months since the morning I woke up, choking on cheap coffee. 6 months of folding tables, budgeting spreadsheets, and learning to sleep through the banging heating pipes of my apartment. I sat next to Rachel. She was impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, flipping through a thick legal binder with a bored, lethal efficiency. I wore a simple gray dress, my hair pulled back. I felt grounded. The phantom pains in my chest, the echoes of a heart attack that hadn't happened in this timeline, had finally stopped waking me up at night. The heavy double doors at the end of the hall opened. David walked in. I didn't recognize him at first. The boyish charm that had carried him through his 20s had entirely evaporated, leaving behind a hollowed-out, gray-skinned stranger. He was wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too big for him, now the fabric hanging off his shoulders like a deflated balloon. His hair was unkempt, greasy at the roots. His eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by dark, bruised flesh. He looked like a man who had been drowning for 6 months and had finally forgotten how to hold his breath. He was flanked by a tired-looking legal aid attorney who seemed like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. David stopped when he saw me. His gaze locked onto mine. There was no anger left in his eyes. There wasn't even indignation, just a bottomless, raw desperation. He looked at me the way a starving dog looks at a piece of meat behind a butcher's window. A tiny, treacherous part of my brain, the ghost of the woman who used to love him, twitched with pity. It was a reflex, as automatic as breathing. Look at him. He's broken. You broke him. I clenched my jaw so hard, my teeth ached. I forced myself to remember the iPad photos, the receipts for Chloe's spa day, the way he had reached out his hand for my salary card while I choked on my coffee. I broke eye contact and looked down at my hands. We moved into the mediation room. It was suffocatingly small, dominated by a large oak table that smelled strongly of lemon pledge. The mediator, a gray-haired woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, sat at the head. Let's make this as painless as possible. The mediator began glancing at the files. We have a fault-based divorce filing. Miss Nora is seeking full physical custody of the minor child with supervised visitation for Mr. David. She is also seeking a disproportionate division of remaining marital assets due to documented financial dissipation. David's lawyer cleared his throat. It sounded like dry leaves scraping together. My client contests the custody arrangement and the financial division. He is currently experiencing a temporary financial hardship, and requests a more equitable split of the wife's retirement accounts to help him secure housing. Rachel didn't even look up from her binder. She just pushed a stack of paper across the table. My client's retirement accounts were funded solely by her income, Rachel said, her voice smooth and cold. Furthermore, the forensic audit of the joint accounts reveals that over the course of 14 months, Mr. David diverted approximately $42,000 to a third party, a Miss Chloe Adams, covering travel luxury goods and cash transfers. David flinched at the name. He slumped lower in his chair, given that the marital debt specifically, the $20,000 deficit on the foreclosed home, and the maxed-out credit cards in Mr. David's name was incurred entirely by his actions. We are prepared to take this to trial if he requests a single dime of my client's retirement. Rachel finished tapping a manicured fingernail against the oak table. The mediator looked at David. Mr. David, is this accurate? Are you prepared to face a judge with this audit? David stared at the wood grain of the table. His hands were trembling, tucked firmly between his knees. I don't have anywhere to live, he whispered. It wasn't an answer to the mediator's question. It was a plea, directed entirely at me. He slowly looked up. The desperation in his eyes was naked, embarrassing in its intensity. Nora, please. I'm sleeping on a floor in a house with 3 college dropouts. I work at a call center, taking abuse from customers 10 hours a day. I can't afford a car. I take the bus for 2 hours just to get to a grocery store. I have nothing. You won, okay? You completely destroyed me. Just leave me enough to get a studio apartment. For Lily's sake. Where is she supposed to sleep when she visits me? The room went dead silent. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead sounded like a dentist's drill. Rachel shifted beside me, ready to interject, but I put a hand on her arm. I looked directly at David. I saw the man who had let me work 70-hour weeks while my blood pressure climbed to lethal levels. I saw the man who had smiled while he packed his bags to sleep with another woman on my dime. Lily will not be visiting you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Yet it felt like a gunshot in the small room. Because you cannot provide a safe environment for her. You couldn't even provide a safe environment when I was paying for the roof over your head. David's breath hitched. A single, pathetic tear spilled over his lower lash line and tracked through the grease on his cheek. As for destroying you, I continued feeling the last, lingering phantom weight lift from my chest. I didn't do a thing, David. I just stopped being your safety net. You hit the ground all on your own. I turned to Rachel. We aren't giving him a cent. If he wants to go to trial, we go to trial. David's lawyer leaned over, whispering furiously into his ear. David just shook his head, a slow, defeated motion. He looked at the paperwork sitting in front of him, the settlement agreement that gave me everything: full custody, my savings, my retirement, and severed him completely from my life, leaving him with only the crushing debt he had accumulated in his own name. He picked up the cheap plastic pen provided by the mediator. His hand shook so badly he could barely hold it. He signed his name. It was a messy, jagged scrawl, the signature of a ghost. I walked out of the courthouse 30 minutes later. The November air was crisp, biting at my cheeks. The gray clouds had parted just enough to let a weak, watery beam of sunlight hit the pavement. I took a deep breath. The air filled my lungs completely. No fluid, no tightness, just the cold, sharp reality of being alive. 2 years since I walked out of that suffocating kitchen. 2 years since I severed the parasite and learned how to sleep on the floor. It was a Saturday morning in early June. Sunlight streamed through the large bay windows of my new living room. It wasn't a sterile, sprawling suburban mansion. It was a sensible 3-bedroom townhouse in a neighborhood with good schools and sidewalks lined with old oak trees. It smelled like roasting coffee vanilla extract and the faint, dusty scent of old library books. I stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes on a cast-iron skillet. The sizzle of the batter was a comforting domestic rhythm. "Mama, look." Lily came tearing around the corner. She was 5 now. Taller, her brown hair pulled into messy pigtails, her knees covered in bright, cartoon character band-aids from a recent tumble off her scooter. She was holding up a piece of thick construction paper, smeared with chaotic, vibrant finger paints. "It's a dragon," she announced, proudly, pointing to a blob of purple and green. "And he's eating a whole car." I laughed, a genuine deep sound that originated from my belly, a sound I didn't know I was capable of making in my first life. I knelt down, ignoring the heat of the stove behind me, and took the painting. "It's terrifying," I told her, kissing her paint-smudged forehead. "I love it. It goes right on the fridge." "Middle of the fridge," she demanded. "Front and center." I agreed. She giggled and darted back toward the living room to resume her artistic destruction. I stood up and leaned against the counter, holding my mug of black coffee. It wasn't cheap, acidic sludge anymore. It was a rich, dark roast I bought from a local cafe. I took a sip, letting the warmth spread through my chest. I felt normal. The hypervigilance of those first few months had faded into a steady, quiet confidence. I still worked hard as a regional director, but I set boundaries. I left the office at 5. I didn't answer emails on weekends. I realized that the crushing stress that had killed me in my past life wasn't just the job. It was the job combined with the emotional hemorrhage of carrying a deadweight husband. Speaking of ghosts, I rarely thought of David anymore. He had become a gray, blurry shape in the rearview mirror of my life. But sometimes, the universe has a funny way of bringing the past into sharp focus, just to remind you of how far you've traveled. A few weeks ago, I had run into mutual acquaintance, one of David's old college buddies, who had managed to retain a shred of decency. We bumped into each other at a hardware store. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, but the gossip spilled out of him like water from a cracked jug. David hadn't bounced back. Without my income, his credit destroyed, and his resume consisting of consulting for a fake startup, he was unemployable in the corporate world. He's working the night shift at a gas station out on Route 9. His friend had told me his voice, a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment. Living in a rented room above a laundromat. He looks bad Nora. He drinks a lot, blames you for everything, says you stole his daughter and ruined his life. I had just nodded, holding my bag of potting soil. I hadn't felt a single flicker of emotion. Not vindication, not guilt, just profound apathy. He ruined his own life, I had replied evenly. I just handed him the bill. Now, standing in my sunlit kitchen, I placed Lily's dragon painting on the refrigerator, securing it with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. The silence of the townhouse wasn't the heavy ticking bomb silence of my old house. It was a peaceful, breathing silence. It was the sound of safety. I placed my hand flat against my chest, right over my sternum. Thump, 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 thump. The rhythm was steady, strong. It was the heartbeat of a woman who had clawed her way out of her own grave, refused to be buried a second time, and built a kingdom from the dirt. I heard Lily drop a box of crayons in the other room, followed by a theatrical groan. Oh, she called out. "I'm coming, Bug." I called back, smiling. I left the coffee on the counter and walked toward the living room, stepping fully into the bright, warm sunlight. My heart was beating, my lungs were clear, and the rest of my life was finally mine. If you felt that deep sense of peace, seeing Nora finally breathe easily in her own home, make sure you hit that like button. It pushes this story to others who need the courage to stop being someone else's safety net. Drop a comment below and tell me what was the most satisfying moment of David's downfall for you. Don't forget to share this video with anyone navigating their own toxic relationship, and subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story of rebirth, revenge, and reclaiming your life. See you in the next one.